Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. Good evening, everyone. Let's dive into something we all face, but rarely talk about openly, the moments when we're too soft, not in kindness, but in avoiding conflict, dodging discomfort, and diluting our truth. Being soft is often mistaken for being kind, but true kindness doesn't mean letting others walk all over us. It means showing up with honesty, even when it's hard. Today, I want to share 5 truths that can help us stop being soft in ways that compromise who we are. Imagine this: you're the person everyone turns to when they need help. You're always there, offering your time, energy, and support without hesitation. You pride yourself on being kind, generous, and dependable. But one day, you find yourself completely exhausted physically, emotionally, and mentally. You've been saying yes to everyone else for so long that you can't even remember the last time you said yes to yourself. This happens because somewhere along the way, we confuse kindness with overextension. We believe that being a good person means always being available, always accommodating, always saying yes, but real kindness, the kind that is sustainable and nourishing, cannot exist without boundaries. When we constantly give without setting limits, we're not being kind, we're betraying ourselves. Boundaries are not selfish. They are an essential act of self-respect. They protect our energy, our time, and our emotional well-being. When we fail to set boundaries, we risk losing touch with who we are and what we need. We start to resent the people we've been overextending ourselves for, even though they're not the problem. The problem is that we haven't honored our limits or communicated them. It's important to remember that boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about letting the right people in under the right conditions. They create a framework where relationships can thrive in a way that feels fair and balanced for everyone involved. Without boundaries, kindness becomes a one-sided exchange where we give endlessly without receiving, and that's not kindness, that's martyrdom. True kindness is rooted in authenticity and mutual respect. It's the courage to say, I want to help, but I also need to take care of myself. It's the honesty to tell someone, I can't do this right now, but I still care about you. It's understanding that you can be loving and firm at the same time. When we set boundaries, we're not only protecting ourselves, we're teaching others how to respect us. And in doing so, we're showing them that kindness isn't about losing yourself in service to others. It's about showing up as your full self with clarity about what you can and cannot give. That's not just kindness, it's strength. Think about the last time you said yes to something you didn't want to do. Maybe a friend asked for a favor, or a coworker piled an extra task on your plate, and you agreed, even though you were already overwhelmed. In that moment, you probably told yourself it was easier to say yes than to explain why you couldn't or shouldn't. You wanted to avoid the discomfort of potentially disappointing someone, creating conflict, or being perceived as difficult. But what happened afterward? Perhaps you completed the favor or task, but instead of feeling good about your generosity, you felt irritated or unappreciated. Maybe you even started resenting the person who made the request, even though they didn't force you to agree. What you were really resenting, though, was the fact that you didn't honor your own needs. When we avoid discomfort in the short term, we often create much larger emotional burdens in the long term. Saying yes to avoid an awkward conversation might feel like the path of least resistance in the moment, but it comes at the cost of our inner peace. Over time, these little moments of self-abandonment add up, and they erode our relationships, not just with others, but with ourselves. Resentment is a sign that something needs to change. It's often our inner voice saying, this doesn't feel fair, or this isn't working for me, but instead of addressing those feelings head on, we often push them aside. We think it's not worth the fight, or I'll deal with it later, the problem is. Later never comes, and the resentment festers. It turns into frustration, bitterness, and even anger, which can spill over into our relationships in ways that aren't productive or kind. What's the alternative? It's leaning into the discomfort of honesty. It's learning to say, I'm sorry, but I can't take this on right now, or I care about you, but I need to focus on my own priorities today. These conversations aren't always easy. They might feel awkward or even confrontational at first, but they're also freeing. They allow us to show up authentically and set the tone for healthier, more balanced relationships. When we face discomfort head on, we build trust not just with others, but with ourselves. We start to believe in our own capacity to handle difficult conversations and situations. We stop fearing the temporary unease that comes with saying no, and start valuing the long-term peace that comes with living in alignment with our truth. Avoiding discomfort might feel safe in the moment, but it's a trap. True growth, connection, and peace come when we choose courage over avoidance. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Authenticity is a word we hear often, but living it is far more challenging than saying it. It's about being true to who you are, what you believe, and what you value, even when it's hard. But here's the catch: authenticity isn't just about saying, this is who I am. It's about aligning your actions, words, and decisions with that truth. And that requires accountability. Accountability means taking a hard look at yourself and asking, am I living in a way that reflects my values? Am I making choices that align with who I say I am? It's not always a comfortable process. In fact, it often requires us to confront parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore: the people-pleasing tendencies, the excuses, the times we stayed silent when we should have spoken up or acted out of fear rather than courage. Being authentic demands that we own those moments. It's about saying, yes, I made that choice, and it wasn't in line with who I want to be. What can I learn from it? Accountability isn't about perfection, it's about progress. It's about being honest with yourself, not to shame or punish, but to grow. One of the biggest challenges of authenticity is that it often requires us to let go of external validation. Sometimes staying true to yourself means disappointing others. It means saying no when everyone else expects a yes. It means standing firm in your beliefs, even when they're unpopular. And it means taking responsibility for the consequences of those decisions. Accountability is what ensures that your authenticity isn't just a mask for impulsiveness or self-indulgence. It grounds you in integrity. But accountability also works in the other direction. It's not just about holding yourself responsible for your mistakes, it's also about owning your successes, your strengths, and the moments when you've shown incredible courage. Too often, we downplay those victories, brushing them off as luck or minimizing their importance. True accountability means celebrating those wins and recognizing them as a reflection of your authentic self. Living authentically and with accountability also transforms your relationships. When you show up as your true self flaws and all you give others permission to do the same, it creates an atmosphere of trust and mutual respect. But it also means that when you mess up, you own it. You say, I was wrong, or I hurt you, and I take responsibility for that. These moments of accountability are what build deep, meaningful connections. The truth is, authenticity without accountability is hollow. It's easy to say, I'm just being me, as an excuse to avoid growth or ignore how your actions affect others. But real authenticity comes with a willingness to evolve. It's about being true to who you are today while striving to become the best version of yourself tomorrow. Accountability is the bridge that gets you there. When you hold yourself accountable, you create a life that isn't just honest, but also intentional. You start to see authenticity not as a destination, but as a daily practice, a commitment to showing up as your best self, owning your truth, and taking responsibility for the life you're creating. And that ultimately is where real freedom and fulfillment are found. People-pleasing is something we've all fallen into at some point in our lives. It's that feeling of constantly saying yes to requests, going out of our way to make others happy, and bending ourselves out of shape to avoid conflict or discomfort. We convince ourselves that this is how we maintain connection, how we show love, or how we prove our worth. But people-pleasing is not connection, it's a performance. When we people please, we are not being true to ourselves. We're often acting from a place of fear of rejection, fear of being judged, fear of not being enough. We believe that if we do everything for everyone else, they will like us more, accept us, or at least stop criticizing us. The problem with this is that it's not sustainable. The more we people please, the more we disconnect from who we truly are, and the more we risk resenting those we're trying to please. At its core, people pleasing is about seeking validation externally rather than from within. We start to look to others for our sense of self-worth, measuring our value based on their approval or appreciation. But real connection, the kind that nurtures growth, trust, and mutual respect, can't exist when we are hiding behind a mask of who we think others want us to be. When we're constantly putting on a show to gain approval, we're not inviting people into our authentic selves. We're inviting them into an image, a carefully curated version of ourselves that we think will be accepted. This doesn't build connection, it builds distance. True connection happens when we show up as we are, not as we think we should be. It happens when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to share our struggles, our doubts, and our imperfections. True connection is about being seen, heard, and understood for who we really are, not who we think we need to be liked. When we stop people-pleasing, we stop playing the role of someone we're not. We begin to create space for relationships that are grounded in authenticity, where both parties can show up as their true selves, flaws and all. This kind of connection is far more rewarding and fulfilling than the shallow, transactional relationships that result from people-pleasing. It's also important to recognize that people-pleasing often comes from a place of insecurity. We worry that if we say no or set a boundary, we'll lose someone's affection, or worse, their respect. But when we start to trust that we are worthy of love and respect exactly as we are without having to earn it through constant giving, we shift the dynamic. We stop allowing others to define our value, and instead we take ownership of it. This doesn't mean we stop being kind, generous, or helpful. It means we stop doing it at the expense of ourselves. We learn to give from a place of abundance, not depletion. We learn that true generosity comes when we are in alignment with our own needs, desires, and boundaries. When we can be honest about our limits, we create room for others to do the same, and the connection becomes more genuine and balanced. Letting go of people-pleasing doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of unlearning old patterns and stepping into our true selves. But when we finally break free from the need to please everyone, we discover a deeper, more meaningful connection with others. One that is built on mutual respect, understanding, and authenticity. In the end, people-pleasing isn't just exhausting, it's isolating. It keeps us stuck in a cycle of seeking approval instead of cultivating real, honest relationships. True connection only happens when we stop performing and start showing up as our true selves. That's when we create bonds that are real, lasting, and rooted in love, not obligation. Strength is often misunderstood. We tend to associate strength with toughness, resilience, and the ability to face challenges head-on without showing emotion or weakness. We see vulnerability as something to be avoided, something that leaves us exposed and susceptible to pain. But the truth is, true strength is found in vulnerability, not in hiding our weaknesses or pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. Vulnerability isn't about being weak, it's about being human. It's about showing up as you truly are with all your flaws, fears, and uncertainties and saying, this is me and I'm still worthy of love and respect despite my imperfections. In a world that constantly pushes us to be perfect, to have it all together, and to project an image of invulnerability, vulnerability is the act of breaking free from that pressure and daring to be seen in our full, authentic selves. It's easy to think that vulnerability makes us fragile, but in reality, it is the most courageous thing we can do. It requires strength to face the discomfort of being open and honest about our emotions, struggles, and needs. It takes courage to admit when we are struggling, to ask for help, and to express our fears and hopes without knowing how others will respond, but it's in these moments of vulnerability that we grow the most. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open the door to deeper connections with others. Vulnerability fosters trust because it shows that we are not afraid to be seen in our rawest form. When we share our true selves, we invite others to do the same. It's through this mutual openness that we can build relationships that are grounded in real understanding, compassion, and empathy. These connections are far more meaningful and fulfilling than the superficial ones built on pretense and perfection. But vulnerability isn't just about sharing our feelings with others, it's also about being vulnerable with ourselves. It's about acknowledging the things that scare us, the dreams that feel out of reach, and the moments when we feel uncertain or lost. It's about facing our own inner truths, even when they are uncomfortable, and having the courage to confront them. This kind of self-vulnerability is the foundation of personal growth. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with our own emotions, we begin to see the areas in our lives where we need to heal, grow, or change. We learn to let go of old narratives that no longer serve us, and we begin to rewrite our stories in a way that aligns with who we truly are. In the process, we find our own strength, not the kind of strength that comes from hiding behind a mask or putting on a brave face, but the kind of strength that comes from knowing that we are enough just as we are. Vulnerability also allows us to face challenges with more resilience. Life isn't always easy. There will be moments of pain, loss, disappointment, and failure. But it is through embracing vulnerability that we find the courage to move through those moments. When we allow ourselves to feel the pain, to grieve, to be disappointed, we make space for healing. By being vulnerable in the face of adversity, we learn that pain is not the end, it is simply a part of the process of growth. True strength doesn't come from pushing our emotions aside or trying to control everything around us. It comes from the willingness to be open, to feel deeply, and to show up in our truth, even when it's difficult. Vulnerability allows us to experience life fully and authentically, without the walls that we often build to protect ourselves from hurt. It's in those moments of openness that we find the courage to take risks, to pursue our dreams, and to love others and ourselves more deeply. It's important to remember that vulnerability is not a one-time act, it's a practice. It's about showing up every day with the willingness to be imperfect, to be seen, and to be open to whatever comes our way. It's about choosing to be real instead of perfect, to be authentic instead of guarded. When we do this, we discover a strength that is far more enduring and meaningful than anything we could have built by hiding behind our walls. In the end, vulnerability is not a weakness, it is the key to true strength. It is what allows us to grow, connect, and heal. It is what gives us the power to live with courage, to love without fear, and to be fully present in our lives. When we embrace vulnerability, we step into our true power, not the power of invulnerability, but the power of being fully, unapologetically ourselves. So, how do we stop being soft? By redefining strength not as avoiding conflict or pleasing others, but as standing tall in our truth. When we embrace this strength, we give others permission to do the same. Let's start showing up for ourselves first. Thank you.